what breaks the silence of solid earth is not the shape your eyes can see. It is the carved will that was already there before your gaze arrived. 3 clicks, 4 clicks, a small dry whisper of a ratchet, like a moth turning in a paper bag. That is the sound my thumb made on a winter morning, in a room I should not have been in, on a watch he had told me was tin. By the time the courtroom heard it tick, it was already too late for him. And I had not yet realized that the man pouring the tea was the one I would expose by sundown. My name is Cordelia Ashcombe. I am 67 years old. For most of my working life, I was a conservator of historic textiles at a small museum off Russell Square, the kind of place where the silence is older than the carpets. I retired the spring before last. Now I tend the family papers, and what remains of the family, what remains is not as much as it was. This happened 6 months ago. The order matters, you see, because the order is the only thing that distinguishes a story from a confession, and I am not yet ready to confess. My grandmother Estelle died in October at the age of 94. She died as she had lived, with the curtains drawn against the morning glare, a cup of weak tea cooling beside the bed, and a small silver pocket watch ticking on the night table beside her right hand. The watch was the last sound in her room, the same ratchet I had heard every Sunday afternoon of my childhood. The Bloomsbury house she left behind is a 4-story townhouse on a quiet square. I grew up in that house. I had the use of it now, by her wish. The use of it, not the ownership. There is a distinction in English law between the two, and a distinction in the heart. I was not yet sure which I had inherited. I went to the house on a Wednesday afternoon in early November. The key was already in my pocket. I had been carrying it for 2 weeks without using it. The drawing room was as she had kept it. The piano against the south wall, lid lowered, a small rosewood box sitting on top of it, the smell of beeswax and old paper, and a faint thread of the lavender she kept in a bowl on the mantelpiece. I lifted the lid of the rosewood box. Inside, on a folded square of cream silk, lay the pocket watch. Silver case, hallmarked. A single ivy leaf incised on the outer back. The face was white enamel, Roman numerals, blued steel hands stopped at 12 minutes past 4. She had not wound it the morning she died. The watch had stopped at 12 past 4, because that is when it stops, when no one winds it. I closed my eyes. I was 9 years old again, in the same room on a Sunday afternoon in 1967. Estelle was beside me on the piano bench. The watch was in her hand. Her thumb was on the crown.
Listen, dearest. Time is the one thing nobody can give you back, so you must learn to hear it coming. Pause not the chime of a clock on a wall. That is announcement, that is not time. I mean the small private sound a thing makes when nobody else is in the room. The kettle settling on a cold hob. The hinge of a door before it gives. The watch in your pocket when the conversation around you has gone wrong. Those are the sounds that tell you the truth. Learn to hear them, dearest, and you will never be lied to in your own house.
I asked her, in the small voice of a 9-year-old, how a person was meant to hear time. She did not laugh. She turned her face to mine.
You stop talking, dearest. That is the trick of it. The whole trick. People who are afraid of being lied to fill the room with their own voice, and then they wonder why they never hear the lie when it comes. You sit, you set your cup down, you let the room speak first. The room will always speak first if you let it. And when you have heard what the room is saying, then, dearest, then you may answer, not before.
I opened my eyes. The drawing room was empty. The watch was silent in my palm. I told her, under my breath, that I was still listening. The room did not answer. The room was only a room. I took the watch from the silk. I held the crown between my thumb and forefinger. I turned it. The ratchet whispered. 3 clicks, 4 clicks, a small dry sound, like a moth turning in a paper bag. The mainspring took the tension. The balance wheel began to swing. And I wept, quietly, briefly, not because she was gone. I wept because the rhythm she had kept for 94 years was now in my hand, and the hand was not hers. I composed myself. I have always been a woman who composes herself. It is the conservator's habit. You stabilize the textile. You stabilize yourself. You proceed. Felix arrived for tea at 4. My younger brother Felix, 62, an architect with a small practice in Highgate, a man who solves problems by drawing them. He brought Saoirse with him, his daughter. My niece, 29 years old and quieter than the room she enters. Saoirse works as a junior archivist at a London auction house that specializes in horology. Her father has, in the past, called her job fiddly. She does not always hear it kindly. We sat at the low tea table by the south window. The watch was in the rosewood box on the side table. We talked about the funeral, about the cards still arriving, about the cousin in Edinburgh who had not flown down. Felix told me, in his brisk way, that he had spoken to Nigel the night before. The reading was scheduled at Chambers for the Thursday following. Nigel sent his love. I murmured that yes, he always sent his love. Felix heard the small, flat note inside it. He grew, very slightly, defensive, reminding me that Nigel had been a Pemberton with us for 40 years. I told him, gently, that I knew. Felix looked at me over the rim of his teacup. He has my mother's eyes. They miss less than people think.
Oh, and Nigel mentioned the watch, the pocket watch. He said it was tin, sentimental value only. He said we should not bother with valuation. Just keep it in the family, was his phrase. He was very clear on that point. I told him I agreed. I did agree, Cordelia. I do agree. It is only a watch.
I set down my teacup. I did not look at Saoirse. I did not look at the rosewood box. I looked instead at the embroidered antimacassar on the chair by the window. The watch is not tin. The watch is silver. The case is hallmarked plainly on the inner edge. I have known this since I was 11 years old. Nigel Pemberton has been a senior partner at a private client firm off Chancery Lane for 30 years. He has held this watch in his hand. He knows the difference between tin and silver. I said none of this. I poured Felix more tea. I let the small wrong note hang in the room like a piano string struck and not yet damped. It is a habit I have. I do not speak the first time I notice a thing. I wait for the second time. The second time tells you whether the first was an accident. Felix and Saoirse left at 5:30. Saoirse turned at the gate and looked back at me. She did not wave. I have thought about that look a great deal since. I closed the door. I went back to the drawing room. I picked up the watch and I listened to it tick. And I said, aloud, to no one, the question I had not been able to ask while my brother was in the room. Why would Nigel Pemberton tell my brother that this watch is tin? He has known the case is silver for 40 years. He poured the tea on the day my mother died, and he knew it then. So, this is not a mistake. This is a sentence chosen carefully, said to my brother, meant to travel by way of my brother to me. The question is not whether he lied. The question is what he is preparing the ground for. Saoirse rang me on the Thursday evening. Her voice on the telephone has a quality I have always loved. She begins each sentence with a small hesitation, and then she finishes in a rush, as though she has decided the water is fine after all. She apologized in her hesitant, rushing way for what she had done. She had taken photographs of the watch on the Sunday after she and her father had left. She had shown them that morning to the senior horologist at her auction house, a Mr. Halloran. He had refused at first to offer an opinion. Then he had told her, in the careful way of a man choosing each word, that the case itself had been fitted for something. Something had been meant to slide into the back. I asked her, slowly, what she meant by slide into the back. She steadied. She had her answer ready.
The inner case back. He said there is a thin slot machined into it. A custom fitting. He said it would have been done by the maker for a specific purpose. He said the purpose is usually a key, a flat key, brass typically, the size of a child's fingernail. He said that kind of fitting is never decorative. It is always functional. Whoever asked for it had something they meant to keep close to the body, every day in a place no thief would think to open. And, Aunt Cordelia, he said the work would have been done in the early 70s at the latest. Anything later, the technique would have been different.
A key. I sat down at the kitchen table. I had been standing by the dresser when the phone rang. I do not remember walking to the table. I remember only that the watch was in the rosewood box in the drawing room, 2 rooms away, ticking. I thanked her. I asked her to come with me to Hatton Garden the next morning. She agreed at once. She knew, she said, an independent watchmaker we should see, an old man named Mr. Wexford. Hatton Garden on a Friday morning in November is a street of narrow shop fronts. There is a particular gray light along that street in autumn, a light that makes silver look like silver and people look like neither. Mr. Wexford's workshop is above a jeweller's near the Holborn end. You climb a staircase that smells faintly of clove oil and machine grease. He is 78, stooped, in an immaculate white cotton coat with a loop on a black ribbon around his neck. He did not say hello. He told me, in the sparse fashion of a man who saved his breath for the bench, to bring it in, to set it down under the lamp, slowly. I did as he asked. The workshop was the size of a stationery cupboard. One bench, one stool, one daylight lamp. The walls were lined with index card drawers, each labeled in a careful copperplate hand. He sat. He took the watch from the silk. He held it under the lamp. He did not open it for nearly 20 minutes. He looked at it. He turned it. He breathed through his nose. He said nothing. Saoirse and I stood behind him. I had never in my life been so aware of the sound of a clock on a wall. I do not think there was a clock on the wall. I think the sound was the watch. He took up a tool no wider than a needle. He found a seam I could not see. He pressed. The outer case back lifted soundlessly. He found the inner case back. He pressed again. The inner cover lifted. He sat for a long moment, looking into the inside of the watch. Then he straightened. He took off his lope. He looked at me, not at Saoirse, in the long gray light from the window.
There should be a key here. Brass. About the size of a child's fingernail. The slot is fitted for it. The slot is empty. I will tell you plain, Mrs. Ashcombe. A slot like this is not a hiding place a maker dreams up on his own. It is commissioned. The owner walked in here and asked for it by name. The owner knew what they were hiding, and they knew who they wanted to find it. The slot is not the secret. The slot is the doorway. The secret is what the key opens, and where in this city it stands waiting.
I put my hand on the edge of the bench. Saoirse, beside me, made a small sound. It was not a word. It was the sound a person makes when something they had hoped was a question turns out to be a sentence. I asked him, slowly, how long the slot had been there. He answered deliberately that the work had been done in the spring of 1972. He remembered it. His father had cut the fitting himself. I repeated his words back to him, carefully. His father. He gave a small nod.
He kept the workshop before me. The lady who owned this watch came to him in the spring of that year. She was 42, dark hair drawn back, plain navy coat. She brought a brass key, already cut. She asked him to fit the inner cover so the key would lie flat against it, hidden when the case was closed. She asked him also to inscribe something on the underside, very small. He used the micro tool, the one we keep in the second drawer, She paid in cash, she did not give a receipt name, and she said only one thing as she left. She said, "My father gave me this watch and I am giving it to my granddaughter, but not yet. Not until she is ready to listen." My father remembered her exact words.
Estelle, 1972. She was 42 then, my age when I qualified. She would have walked here from Bloomsbury on a spring morning with the watch in her cardigan pocket and a brass key in her purse. I asked him whether the inscription could still be read. He told me, with care, that it could. The cuts were shallow. Time had shaded them almost invisible. A fine polish, applied gently, would re-illuminate them. He would do the work. He would not do it without my full instruction. I told him I would think about it. I told him I needed first to find the key. He looked at me a long moment over the lope.
Find the key first. The inscription will tell you what to do with it. Do not let anyone read the inscription before you have the key in your hand. Pause once. If the inscription is read while the key is still missing, the person who took the key will know what to do next, and you will not. Your grandmother arranged it that way for a reason. She trusted the order of things. So must you. Key first, then the inscription. Then and only then, whatever box or door or drawer the key was cut for. In that order, Mrs. Ashcombe. Not one step out of it.
Saoirse and I walked down the staircase. We walked the length of Hatton Garden. We did not speak until we reached the corner of Holborn Circus. Then she stopped. She put her hand on my sleeve. She said it low and urgent. The last person to handle the watch had been Nigel, 3 weeks before the funeral. He had taken it for the executor's inventory. Her father had told her so. I told her, slowly, that yes, he had taken it. He had returned it the day before the funeral, in the Rosewood box, with the silk folded the way I was holding it now. Saoirse said, very small, that he had told her father it was tin. I repeated it back to her quietly. He told your father it was tin. We walked on toward the tube. We did not say what we were both now thinking. There is a kind of silence between two women in a London street that is itself a sentence. I rang Felix that evening. I did not tell him about the slot. I did not tell him about Wexford. I told him only that I wanted to confirm one date. When did Nigel collect the watch? Felix sighed on the line. I could hear his pencil tapping against his drafting table. The pencil tap is what he does when he is being patient with me. Felix told me, with the patient tiredness of a man being humored, that the date had been the 3rd week of September. A Tuesday afternoon. Nigel had taken the watch, the photograph albums, the address book, the small jewelry. He had given the housekeeper a written receipt. Felix had a copy of it. I asked him, mildly, what the receipt listed the watch as. He paused a long moment. Then he read it out. Pocket watch, white metal, sentimental. He reminded me that Nigel was the executor named in the will. He was allowed to assemble the inventory. I told him, carefully, that the case was silver. It was hallmarked. The hallmark was on the inner edge. Anyone who opened the watch could see it. Felix sharpened. He asked me, with the rising inflection of a man whose patience had reached its hinge, whether I was seriously suggesting Nigel had written down white metal because he was taking the silver. I let the silence stand. I have learned in 50 years of conversation with my brother that silence between us is the only honest punctuation we have. I told him, very quietly, that I was suggesting nothing. I was asking him to remember the date of the receipt and the words on it. That was all. He went cool. "Fine," he said. I thanked him quietly and wished him good night. The first crack between my brother and me in 50 years had just opened along a hairline I had not known was there. I went to Lincoln's Inn the following Monday. Late afternoon, the kind of November dusk that turns the gas lamps along the fields into yellow blurs above wet stone. I rehearsed what I would say. I would be civil. I would not accuse. I would give him the chance to explain. His chambers are on the south side, second floor, paneled in dark oak. The clerk showed me into his private office. Nigel rose from behind the partner desk, 6'1", slightly stooped, charcoal pinstripe, pale blue pocket square folded flat. The horn-rimmed reading glasses low on his nose. He came round the desk and took both my hands in his. He greeted me with the warm paternal stream of words he had used at every Ashcombe gathering for 40 years. "Dear girl, sit by the fire. Tea, the proper tea. None of the bag nonsense." He poured the tea himself from a heavy silver pot. He used both hands, as he has always used both hands when he pours. It is one of the small theaters of his charm. I sat in the leather wing chair. When he had settled into his own chair across from me, the firelight on his glasses, I told him, mild and conversational, that there was a small curiosity I wanted to ask about. The pocket watch. Estelle's watch.
Ah, the little tin watch. Sentimental piece. Lovely thing. What about it, dear girl? I do hope you are not letting your grief fasten itself onto a small object. That is the trap, you see. The trap of bereavement. The mind looks for an anchor and it grips the first thing in reach. A teaspoon, a scarf, a pocket watch. I have seen it many times in my practice. The kindest thing one can do for oneself is to set the object aside for a season, let the grief breathe, and come back to it later. Tin or silver, it makes no difference. The watch is a memento. Treat it as one.
I told him, light and almost amused, that it was not tin. The case was silver, hallmarked. I had checked again on Sunday. He laughed. The laugh was warm. The laugh was easy. The laugh was, I noticed, just a fraction longer than the joke required. He chuckled and waved it away, white metal and silver and tin. The jeweler would tell me they were all of a piece in market terms, unless one was a collector. He had used the colloquial term. He asked me to forgive an old man his shorthand. I told him, mild as before, that of course I would. There was, however, one other thing. I had had occasion, the week prior, to look inside the case. There was a slot machined into the inner cover. I wondered whether he had noticed it when he had the watch for the inventory. He did not answer at once. He set down his teacup on the saucer. He did it carefully. The cup made a small, dry sound against the china, like a ratchet, like a moth turning in a paper bag. I noticed I was, for the first time in my life, watching Nigel Pemberton with the attention I gave to a sleeve I was about to repair. He answered, slower and gentler, that yes, a slot. He did believe he had noticed something of the sort, a small fitting of some kind. He had assumed it was a maker's quirk. I told him, gently, that the watchmaker on Hatton Garden had been clear with me. The fitting was for a key, a brass key, about the size of a child's fingernail. Nigel rose from his chair. He walked to the desk. He opened the second drawer on the left. He took out a small velvet pouch. He came back to the fire. He sat. He opened the pouch. He laid on the small table between us, with both hands, a brass key, about the size of a child's fingernail.
You mean this, perhaps? Yes, it was loose in the silk lining of the box when I first opened it for the inventory. I assumed it had worked free of the fitting. I removed it for safekeeping. I always intended to mention it. I am sorry, dear girl. I should have mentioned it sooner. The truth is, with all the paperwork of probate, with the housekeeper to settle, and the cousin in Edinburgh asking after the silver, the small things slip. You will forgive an old man one oversight in 40 years of service. The key is yours. Of course it is yours. Take it. Take it now, with my apologies.
I picked up the key. I held it under the lamp. The brass was bright. The cuts on the bit were sharp. The flange was the wrong width. I had measured the slot in Wexford's workshop. This key was clean in a way the rest of the watch was not. I asked him, mildly, what it opened.
It opens a small safe deposit box at a private bank in Holborn. Your grandmother had taken it out in the 1970s. I went round myself the week I had the watch, on the chance the key fitted a box of hers in our own holdings. The box contained only papers, dear girl, nothing of consequence. Sentimental items, a few letters, a photograph or two, faded by now, the corners beginning to lift the way old photographs do. I have already filed them with the inventory. You will see them at the reading on Thursday. There is nothing for you to worry yourself over. Estelle was a tidy woman. She left her affairs as she lived them, in order and without surprises.
He smiled. The smile reached his eyes. The smile reached his hands. The smile, I am ashamed to say, very nearly reached me. I said thank you. I finished my tea. I let him kiss me on both cheeks at the door. I walked back along the colonnade in the gas lamp light, and I told myself all the way to the Strand that I had been ridiculous, that a 40-year acquaintance does not shatter on the width of a brass flange. I walked the Strand under an umbrella. The drizzle had begun. I told myself the things one tells oneself when one is preparing to be wrong about a thing one is, in fact, not wrong about. I almost convinced myself that was the lowest hour, not the betrayal itself. The hour I almost forgave the betrayal before I had named it. The courier rang the bell at 9:05 that night. He carried a stiff envelope embossed with the Pemberton crest. I signed. I took it into the kitchen. I opened it with the small bone knife I keep in the drawer for letters. Inside was the draft probate inventory, 6 pages. Estelle Margaret Ashcombe, deceased the 11th of October. The Bloomsbury house with its valuation. The piano, the silver tea service, the pearl strand. And then, on the second page, under the heading, Personal Effects of Sentimental Value, pocket watch, white metal, negligible market value. Item 1 of 47, no further description. I turned the pages slowly. There was no reference anywhere in the inventory to a safe deposit box at a private bank in Holborn. There was no reference to a brass key. There was no reference to letters Nigel Pemberton had filed at his own discretion. I opened the Rosewood box. I took out the watch. I opened the case. I held the inner cover up to the kitchen lamp. The slot was empty. The slot was the same width Wexford had measured. The brass flange of the key Nigel had laid on the table between us in his chambers was at least 1 millimeter wider. And I knew, not in the way one knows a thing one has been told, in the way one knows a thing one has been refusing to know for 3 weeks. The man who had refilled my teacup with both hands had also, with both hands, taken the one thing my grandmother had hidden inside silver and time. He had taken the key. He had opened the box. He had filed his version of the contents. He had handed me a different key in a different room and watched me, with kind eyes, decide whether I would believe him. I did not weep. I did not ring Felix. I held the watch open in my left palm. With my right hand, I took the small leather notebook beside the fruit bowl and the fountain pen. I wrote the date. I wrote the time. I wrote the address of his chambers. I wrote word by word what he had said to me, from the wing chair to the kiss at the door. Then I wrote one further line. I wrote it in the conservator's hand I learned in the museum, the hand that does not shake. He laid a brass key on the table. The flange was the wrong width. The key was new. He did not bring back the key my grandmother gave him. He brought back a different key. He brought it back to me, but he did not bring it back. Pia's ones, and I, who watched him do it, accepted the kiss on both cheeks at the door and walked the colonnade telling myself I was ridiculous. That is the part I will have to forgive in myself. In time, not now, in time. For now I will only write it down so it cannot be unwritten. I telephoned Mr. Wexford the following morning. He was already in the workshop. I told him what I had found. I told him what Nigel had said. I told him what the inventory listed. I needed the inscription read. He was silent on the line for a long moment. Then he said only, "Come at 6. Bring the watch. Bring food. We will be here for many hours." I went 6 nights in all. I sat on a high stool against the wall of his workshop. I held the loop light at the angle he asked for. The clove oil in the brown bottle smelled of the church my mother took me to as a girl. He cleaned the movement first. He oiled the pivots with a brush whose tip was a single hair. He worked at a pace that would have seemed slow if I had been watching the clock. I was watching him. On the 4th night, near midnight, he turned to the inner case back. He took up a tiny applicator and a jeweler's polish, so faint it looked like water. He worked for 2 hours, with pauses, in absolute silence. I do not know how to describe what happened next. The cuts began to lift out of the silver. They did not appear. They emerged, as though they had been there always, and the metal had only been waiting for the correct light. 11 words came up out of the inside of the watch in my grandmother's hand. Above them, a date in tiny capitals. Below them, a witness mark. He did not let me read them yet. He covered the case back with a soft black cloth. He looked at me over the lope.
Your grandmother had us write it small enough that only someone who was looking would find it. She did not want it found by accident. Pause once. We will read it on Friday morning, in the only room where reading it will count. Anywhere else, Mrs. Ashcombe. And it is only a story. A nice story, a story your brother might shake his head at and your old solicitor will explain away with a chuckle. But in front of the bench, with counsel present and the bailiff at the door, the same 11 words become evidence. The room is what makes the difference. Do not waste your grandmother's 11 words on a kitchen, or a chamber's fire, or a grave. She did not cut them for kitchens. She cut them for a courtroom.
I said, very quietly, the word for the room he meant. The courtroom. He gave the smallest nod. The reading was the thing. It had to happen in front of the bench. Anywhere else it was only a story. There, it was evidence. He fitted the inner cover back into the case. He fitted the outer cover. He wound the watch 3 turns. He set the hands. He laid it in my palm. The second hand began to sweep. I retained a barrister on the Wednesday. Her name is Miss Petrie. 43 chambers in the inner temple. She does not raise her voice. She raises her eyebrows. Saoirse had recommended her. I sat across her desk for 1 hour and told her the whole of it, in order, with the notebook open between us.
Miss Ashcombe, I will ask you one question, and I will ask you to think before you answer. Are you certain you wish to introduce this evidence in open court? Once it is read, it cannot be unread. Once your executor is exposed in front of the bench, your family will not be the same. Your brother will not be the same. The man Nigel Pemberton has been to your family for 40 years will end in a single morning. There is no version of this hearing that allows him to remain. Some clients in your position choose a private settlement. The estate is restored, the executor is quietly removed, the family keeps the story inside the house. I will not advise you either way. I will only ask whether you have weighed both.
I answered steadily that the family was not the same now. The only difference was that I was the only one who knew it. She gave a small nod and moved at once to the procedure.
Very well. We will make an emergency application this afternoon for permission to introduce one piece of physical evidence at Friday's hearing. I will draft the application tonight. Your niece will draft the horological provenance affidavit, and we will file it under her professional designation, not the family name, which gives it independent weight. Mr. Wexford will be available to attest in person if the bench requests it. The watch itself will travel with you, on your person, until the moment it is presented. It does not leave your pocket. Not for tea, not for the cloakroom. Your brother. Does your brother know?
I told her quietly that I had said only that I had something to show in court. I had not said what. Miss Petrie said mildly that he would be there. That was all that mattered. I rang Felix that night. I asked him to be at the Royal Courts on Friday morning at 9:30. I asked him to wear the dark suit. I asked him to trust me for the length of one hearing, even though he did not yet have the reason. He was silent on the line. Then he said only, "I will be there, Cordelia. I do not pretend to understand. I will be there." It was the most useful sentence my brother had ever spoken to me. Friday morning, the 14th of November. I dressed slowly. The dark navy dress with the long sleeves. Estelle's pearls, the small river pearls she had worn every day of her adult life. The gray wool cardigan. The watch on its chain in my left cardigan pocket, where she had carried it for 60 years. I took the bus to the Strand. The bus gives you back the city in the order you grew up reading it. I sat on the upper deck. I got off at the Royal Courts. The Royal Courts of Justice on the Strand. The Gothic facade in the morning light, the queue of barristers in their black gowns on the steps. I climbed the steps. Felix was already there. He was wearing the dark suit. He took my elbow. He asked, low and careful, whether I was well. I told him I was, and thanked him for coming. He said he had not slept well. Nor had I. We would sleep on Friday night. Saoirse was already in the great hall, the leather satchel against her hip, the affidavit in a buff folder. She did not speak. She squeezed my hand. Her hand was cold. Nigel came through the doors at 9:20, with 2 junior associates behind him. The pinstripe, the pale blue pocket square. He saw us across the hall, and he came to us at once. He laid his hand on my arm, with the warmth he had laid it on my arm at every Ashcombe gathering for 40 years. He spoke to me with the warm paternal tone of every Sunday gathering, telling me I mustn't put myself through this. He asked me to sit with him on the bench against the wall and let him explain it before we went in. I let him. I let him lead me to the bench against the wall. I let him pat my hand. I said yes to everything he said. I let him believe what he had already believed for 3 weeks, that I was the kind of grand niece who would, in the end, defer. It is one of the small advantages of a quiet voice. People assume the voice and the will are the same instrument. They are not. They have never been. We were called at 10. Court 11. Wood-paneled walls, the bench raised at the front, the royal arms above it in carved oak. The judge was a courteous man in his early 60s. He had read the papers. He looked at us over the rim of his glasses without unkindness. He greeted us mildly. He named the matter before him as the estate of Estelle Margaret Ashcombe, deceased. He named the codicil Nigel had presented, dated November of 2019. He invited Mr. Pemberton to take him through it. Nigel rose. He had the codicil in his hand on heavy cream paper. He spoke for 14 minutes. He spoke beautifully. He spoke of Estelle's wishes in her later years, of conversations they had had over tea at her drawing room, of his own reluctance to accept the role of principal beneficiary. Felix's face began to shift at minute 6. By minute 10, he was no longer looking at Nigel. He was looking at the codicil on the bench. By minute 14, he turned to me. His voice was a whisper that the row behind us could not hear. He whispered to me, urgent and low, asking whether I had known about this, the house, had I known. I whispered back that I had not. He whispered that Estelle never would have. I whispered, very calm, that I knew Felix. I knew. Nigel sat. The judge began to leaf through the codicil. He took his time. He was on the verge of accepting it. The signatures were good. The witnesses had been independent. The seal was clean. Miss Petrie rose. She did not raise her voice.
Your Honor, with your permission, the petitioner respectfully requests 2 minutes of the court's time to introduce one piece of physical evidence. The evidence is an inscribed object whose existence has not previously been disclosed in these proceedings because it was not previously known to exist in evidentiary form. The petitioner believes the inscription is directly material to the codicil before you. The provenance of the object is attested by independent affidavit from a senior horologist and by a craftsman who can speak to the object's history from 1972 to today. The reading will take less than 1 minute. We respectfully invite the court to permit it.
The judge looked at her. He looked at me. He looked at Nigel briefly. He laid the codicil flat on the bench. He folded his hands. He gave her, in the mildest of voices, the 2 minutes she had asked for, and told her to proceed. I rose. The chain of the watch was visible against my cardigan. I drew it out. The case caught the high gray light from the windows. I walked the 3 paces to the front of counsel's bench. I stood facing the judge. Nigel was 3 feet to my right. I did not look at him. I opened the case. The hinge gave its small dry click. I opened the inner cover. The micro-lettering on the underside of the inner cover faced upward, into the light. The watch was ticking in my open palm. I think the judge could hear it. I think Felix could hear it. I think 3 feet to my right, Nigel could hear it. I did not look to see. I read aloud. I read slowly. I had practiced this in my kitchen on Thursday night, with the watch in my palm and the cat asleep on the chair beside me. I read in the conservator's voice, the voice that does not shake. Inscribed inside, by the watchmaker, on the underside of the inner cover, dated the 14th of March, 1972, witnessed by Mr. A. Wexford, Hatton Garden, Pause ones. The lettering is in the hand of Estelle Margaret Ashcombe, my grandmother. The witness mark is the maker's, struck the same day. The cuts are shallow, made small enough that only a person who knew to look would find them. Mr. Wexford's son, the present proprietor, is in attendance and prepared to attest to the date and to the witness mark before the court. To Cordelia and Felix, equally, Box 4471, Holborn. Trust the man with the second key only if he brings it back. Pause ones. 11 words. To my brother and to me in equal share, by the only hand that had the right to dispose of the property. The box at the bank, and one final instruction, Your Honour, written in the year 1972 by a woman who had already understood what she was guarding against. I lifted my eyes from the watch. The courtroom was so still, I could hear the radiator under the high windows. I could hear the small creak of the leather binder on the bench in front of the judge. I could hear, distinct and unhurried, the watch in my open palm. I spoke to the bench. I did not speak loudly. Your Honour, the second key was placed in the custody of the executor on the 23rd of September of this year. He has not brought it back. The key produced in his chambers last Monday evening was a different key. The brass flange does not fit the slot in this watch. I have measured both with the watchmaker. The key in his chambers was newly cut. The original is, I believe, still in his possession, or has already opened the box at the bank, named in the inscription. I am willing to demonstrate the measurement to the court at the bench, in your sight, with the watchmaker present to attest. The judge sat very still. He looked at the codicil on the bench. He looked at the watch in my palm. He looked at Nigel.
Mr. Pemberton, will you produce the key, please?
Nigel did not stand. His hand went to the inside breast pocket of his pinstripe jacket. The hand stayed there. The hand searched. The hand moved to the other inside pocket. He took out a leather wallet. He opened it. He closed it. He put it back. He cleared his throat. He cleared it again. The cleared throat made a small dry sound, like a ratchet, like a moth turning in a paper bag.
Your Honor, the key. The key is, I have it filed at Chambers. I did not bring it. I had no notice that the key was material to today's hearing. I will, of course, produce it within the hour, if the court will indulge me. There is a perfectly straightforward explanation, Your Honor, which I would prefer to give in private, once the original key is on the table. The petitioner, with respect, is grieving, and the inscription, while quite touching, is open to several readings.
Mr. Pemberton, the codicil before me names you as principal beneficiary of the property described in the inscription read aloud by Miss Ashcombe. The inscription is dated 1972 and witnessed. The codicil is dated 2019. Both documents purport to express the wishes of the same testator concerning the same assets. Both cannot stand on the strength of unverified custody alone. I am suspending consideration of the 2019 codicil pending forensic review of the inscription of the watch, of the safe deposit box at the named bank, and of the chain of custody of the brass key from the 23rd of September to today's date. Mr. Pemberton, I would also caution you, in the plainest terms, that the court will be considering, in due course, whether your conduct in this matter has been consistent with your duties as executor. The chain of custody you have described in your inventory does not, on the face of it, match the physical evidence presented this morning. You will have leave to be represented by counsel at the further hearing. Counsel for the petitioner will be informed of the date in the usual way. The matter is adjourned.
The judge rose. The courtroom rose. The judge left the bench. The courtroom sat. I remained standing. The watch was still ticking in my open palm. I closed the inner cover. I closed the outer cover. I did not close it loudly. I closed it the way Estelle had taught me to close it on a Sunday afternoon in 1967. Carefully, as though the closing was the whole point. I returned the watch to my left cardigan pocket. I turned to my right. I looked, finally, at Nigel Pemberton. He had not risen. His hand was still inside his jacket. He was looking at the bench. The pale blue pocket square was a fraction crooked. He did not look at me. I felt nothing. That is the truth I owe you. I felt no triumph and no anger and no grief. I felt only a kind of clean attention, the way a conservator feels at the end of a long stabilization. The work was done. The watch had spoken. My grandmother's 11 words had carried 53 years and arrived intact in a paneled room on the Strand. Felix turned to me. He opened his mouth. He closed it. He opened it again. He spoke, broken and soft, 4 words I will not forget. He said my name. He said he was so sorry. I nodded once. I did not speak. There was no sentence I could have spoken to him in that room that he had not already, in those 4 words, spoken to me. Saoirse, beside him, began to cry, not loudly, the way she had begun to cry when Estelle's coffin was carried from the church in October. A small, contained crying that did not interrupt anything. I put my hand on her shoulder. The watch in my pocket continued to tick. Nigel gathered his papers. He did it slowly. He did not look up. The 2 junior associates packed his briefcase for him. They let him out by the side door reserved for counsel. He passed within a foot of me. He did not turn his head. That was the only sentence he would speak to me for the rest of his life, and he spoke it by not speaking. We came out onto the steps of the royal courts at 11:20. The morning had thinned. There was a weak winter sun on the spires above us, and a pale wash of light across the wet flagstones below. I stopped on the top step. Felix went down ahead of me. He stopped at the bottom and turned and waited, hands in pockets, his face looking up at me with the expression he had worn the day our father died. I took the watch from my left cardigan pocket. I held it in my right palm. The chain hung against my wrist. The case was warm from my pocket. I turned the crown between my thumb and forefinger. The ratchet whispered. 3 clicks, 4 clicks, a small dry sound like a moth turning in a paper bag. I had heard that sound every Sunday afternoon of my childhood. I had heard it on the morning of the funeral. I had heard it on the bench in front of the judge. I heard it now on the steps of the Royal Courts of Justice. And for the first time, I heard it not as her leftover heartbeat, but as my own time, beginning. We walked along the Strand together, Felix on my left, Saoirse half a pace ahead of us. None of us spoke at first. There was no need.
Cordelia, I have been wrong about Nigel and about you. For 50 years I called it your lingering. I thought you waited too long. I thought you let things sit in the room past the point where a sensible person would have spoken, and I told myself, year after year, that what you had was a kind of weakness dressed up as patience. I see now it was the other way round. I'm sorry for the years I called it lingering, Cordelia. I'm sorry I did not understand there is a difference between waiting too long and waiting until the right moment.
I was not certain of the difference myself, Felix. Not until Friday. The difference is not in the one who waits. It is in the moment that arrives. A moment cannot be hurried, and it cannot be made up for once it is past. Estelle taught me that, on the bench beside the piano, when I was 9 years old. I have only just understood her this week. We have a long winter ahead, you and I. There will be time to walk through what was in front of us all along, and to forgive ourselves for not having seen it sooner. He took my arm. He had not taken my arm since our mother died. He took it now. We walked the rest of the Strand that way. I will tell you, before we end, what I have come to think about trust. Trust is not a thing a person earns once and keeps. 40 years of charm at our table did not entitle Nigel Pemberton to keep what was not his. Trust is a thing a person renews, day by day, by bringing the key back from every small private place where one could quietly put it in one's own pocket and tell oneself no one would ever check. My grandmother, in 1972, walked up a staircase on Hatton Garden with a brass key in her purse. She had it fitted into the back of a watch she would carry every day for the rest of her life. She trusted, instead, that when the moment came, one of us would look. She did not say which of us. She did not say when. She said only the thing she had said to me on a Sunday afternoon in the year 1967.
Listen, dearest, time is the one thing nobody can give you back, so you must learn to hear it coming. Pause 1, and when you have heard it, dearest, do not be afraid to set down the cup and stand up and walk into the room you have been waiting outside of all your life. The room is yours. It has been yours since you first heard the sound. You only had to wait until the sound was loud enough to follow.
I came back to the Bloomsbury house at dusk. I was alone in the drawing room. The lamp on. The rosewood box on the piano. I took the watch from my pocket. I laid it on the silk. I left the lid open. I sat across from it in the high-backed chair and I listened to it tick. I will not tell you what I have decided to do with the Bloomsbury house. I have not decided. The safe deposit box, Felix and I will inspect together next Tuesday at 10. I will not tell you whether I will sell the house or live in it. I will not tell you whether I will speak to Nigel Pemberton again. I do not yet know. I am 67 years old. I have time, and I have learned this autumn how to hear it coming. I will tell you only this. I wound the watch again before I went up to bed. 3 clicks, 4 clicks. A small dry whisper, like a moth turning in a paper bag. The mainspring took the tension. The second hand began to sweep. The watch is still ticking. I am still listening. That for now is enough. Stories like this one live here at the Porch Lake. Thank you for listening, and may you keep your own time well.